Thank you all for coming. We're here today to provide a comprehensive update on the Otis Lane homicide investigation. Today you will hear from Sheriff Caprice Massey, Detective Mark Pavoni, District Attorney Kevin Barton, and Amy Babcock, the Executive Director for the Domestic Violence Resource Center. We will take questions after all the speakers have concluded. Sheriff.
Thank you for being here. As Sheriff of Washington County, I want to begin by acknowledging the profound impact this tragedy has had on our community. 5 lives were taken in a manner that is difficult for any of us to comprehend, and many families, friends, and neighbors are still grappling with deep and immeasurable loss. Our hearts remain with them. Although the suspect is deceased, this does not mark the end of our work. Evidence processing, laboratory analysis, and timeline reconstruction will continue for months. Our commitment now is to provide the families of Mary, Rowan, Stella, Lindsay, and Alvin with answers as we learn them. They deserve nothing less. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Detective Mark Pavoni for a detailed case brief.
Good afternoon. My name is Detective Mark Pavoni with the Washington County Sheriff's Office Violent Crimes Unit. I am also a member of the Washington County Major Crimes Team, and I was assigned as the lead investigator for this case. This investigation was handled by a very large team who have been working together nonstop on this event over the past days. Before providing an overview of the investigation, I want to acknowledge the family members and friends who are still just starting to process the loss of so many loved ones. A team of detectives has been in constant communication with those families and have provided them with as much information as they are ready to receive. That support will continue for as long as the families find it necessary. While we are prepared today to share details about this investigation, we are balancing that with honoring them and maintaining as much dignity as possible for the lives that were lost. On Saturday, August 22nd, just after 5 a.m., a neighbor called 911 to report a fire near their property. As the Forest Grove Fire Department was responding, the neighbor drove to try to find the exact location of the fire to help put it out. He found a car fully engulfed in the driveway of 47350 Northwest Otis Lane, but was not able to see any bodies due to the fire and overall darkness. As the Forest Grove Fire Department began putting the car and small brush fire out, they found a deceased person and then a second. Those people appeared to have been shot in the head. The fire department immediately notified dispatch to send law enforcement and then backed out of the area just before 5:30 a.m. The first deputy was on scene in less than 4 minutes. Additional responding deputies formed a team and began to check the property. This is a rural property with numerous buildings, sheds, and structures. Very early in the search, deputies found all 5 bodies. As they continued to check the property, they found a dead dog and 2 dead cats inside the main home. An additional injured cat was later found in the home. Despite emergency veterinary care, that cat was humanely euthanized on Monday. Deputies found another dead dog near the back of the property. All 5 animals had been shot. While deputies were searching the property, the resources needed for the investigation began responding. The scene was secured, and we obtained a search warrant to process the entire property. All 5 bodies were found in or near the driveway near the main home. Although they were not identified until later on, Alvin Chu's body was inside the vehicle which had been on fire. Mary Kimsey's body was outside that vehicle on the ground. Stella Kimsey's body was inside another vehicle parked in the driveway. Lindsay Haraldson's body was on the ground near that vehicle. Rowan Kimsey's body was found on the walkway near the driveway and home. Early in the investigation and through the next day, we learned Rowan lived on the property with her daughter Stella and Stella's boyfriend, Benjamin Parker. Stella and Mr. Parker lived in the main home, and Rowan lived in one of the other buildings. Mary is Rowan's mom and Stella's grandma and used to live on the property. Lindsay was Stella's best friend, and Alvin was Lindsay's partner. Mary, Stella, Lindsay, and Rowan had each been shot multiple times. Investigators believe Alvin was likely killed in the same manner. The evidence at the scene indicated each person was shot with a .22 caliber gun, and many shell casings were found in the immediate area. In addition to setting the first car on fire, the suspect set individual fires at each of the other 4 bodies, including trying to set the car Stella's body was in on fire. The suspect also tried to set a carport and the main home on fire without success. The initial first responders reported that some of the bodies may have been duct taped, which did not turn out to be the case. The suspect had used tarps to cover the bodies on the ground before setting those fires, and the melted tarps looked similar to duct tape in places. There is no evidence that any of the bodies were duct taped, bound, or moved after they were killed. The initial focus of our investigation was to identify the 5 bodies and to determine if the suspect might be among them. Due to the intensity of the fire, we could not at first know if the body inside the car belonged to Mr. Parker. As we began to access phone location data, that became a critical piece of the case and soon helped us identify Mr. Parker as the suspect. Those records showed he was at the property on Friday evening and into the early hours of Saturday morning. At 4:42 a.m. on Saturday, his phone left the property and began to move south toward Forest Grove, and then moved east into Cornelius before the phone was shut off at 5:15 a.m. Although that indicated he was with his phone, it remained possible at that point in the investigation that someone else took his phone and he was one of the bodies at the scene. We got the next critical update for his phone data on Sunday. That showed that he had turned his phone back on at 7:55 p.m. on Saturday night near Enumclaw, Washington. It also showed he made a lengthy phone call to his mother. At that point on Sunday afternoon, when we learned that information, we were confident he was responsible for the deaths and immediately moved into a plan to arrest him. Detectives began contacting law enforcement in the Enumclaw area and also sent out a bulletin to all western states. We were able to identify the pickup truck he was driving and included that license plate. Detectives were also preparing an arrest warrant for 5 counts of murder in the first degree. While those steps were being taken, Mr. Parker's mother called one of the detectives who had already established contact with her on Saturday. His mother shared that during the phone call he made to her on Saturday night, her son confessed to this crime. He said he had been planning this for a while and that it was premeditated. He said he planned to kill 3 people, but 2 more people were also killed. He confessed to killing the animals, setting the fires, and trying to burn the property down. He said he drove away, and as he did, he passed some of the first responding fire trucks. He then drove until he ran out of gas. He knew he would face more punishment because it was premeditated, and indicated he was not prepared to face those consequences and was going to kill himself. He did not identify who he killed or explain a motive. He also did not say where he was currently located. After completing that call with his mother at 9:11 p.m. on Saturday night, he immediately turned his phone off and it was never turned back on. As the intense search for him continued during Sunday afternoon, an officer with the Enumclaw Police Department found his truck shortly before 3 p.m. Enumclaw Police utilized flock cameras and confirmed the truck had been in that area on Saturday night. When the truck was located, the person inside the truck was not responding to commands to surrender and was not moving. When they had enough resources to safely approach the truck, they found Benjamin Parker had shot himself in the head in the truck using a .22 caliber handgun, which we believe is the same weapon used at the crime scene. On Saturday and Sunday, while all of the other investigative steps were underway, a team was processing the complex crime scene, which included the remains of 5 people, 4 animals, gunfire, and arson. That group included the Washington County Medical Examiner's Office, our Sheriff's Office, Property and Evidence, and the Oregon State Police Forensic Services Division. I want to particularly recognize that team. For 2 days, those key 8 people expertly documented and preserved evidence while doing everything possible to preserve dignity to the remains of all the people and animals. There were also numerous livestock on the property. That same group I just mentioned ensured the animals were fed and watered. Working with neighbors and with the blessing of the Kimsey family, all of the livestock have been rehomed. Yesterday, we learned more information about the events leading up to the murders. Mary Kimsey, who was Rowan's mom and Stella's grandma and used to live on the property, was now living in Portland. On Friday night, around 8:30 p.m., she texted a friend who lives out of state. Mary said Stella and Mr. Parker got into a horrible fight sometime during either Thursday evening or overnight into the early hours of Friday morning, and Stella told him he had to leave. Lindsay, Stella's best friend, told Mary she was on the phone with Stella around that time when the call suddenly dropped. Lindsay couldn't get Stella on the phone again, so she called up to the property to talk to Stella's mom, Rowan. Rowan told Lindsay she was going to go check on Stella and would call Lindsay back. Rowan did not call Lindsay back, so Lindsay then went up to the property. Mary texted her friend that she was not able to reach Rowan, Stella, or Lindsay, so she was going to pick up Alvin, Lindsay's partner, and the 2 of them were going to drive out there. That was the last the friend ever heard from Mary. Mary had previously told her friend that Mr. Parker would argue with Stella and could get very upset. She also shared that he had a mental health evaluation, which diagnosed him with bipolar disorder. During the search of the home, we did find mental health-related prescription bottles with his name on them. However, until toxicology results from his autopsy are complete, it is unknown if he was taking his medications as prescribed. Early on Saturday, detectives interviewed all of the neighbors. Some of them reported hearing gunshots on Friday and again on Saturday, just before the fire was seen. Based on all of what we have learned, we believe Mr. Parker murdered Stella first. We believe he then murdered Rowan as she came to check on her daughter. When Lindsay drove out to the property from her home to check on Rowan and Stella, he then murdered her. Finally, Mary and Alvin arrived, and he murdered both of them. After killing the animals and setting the fires, he fled in a silver Toyota Tacoma. That truck was registered to Rowan, and he regularly drove it prior to this event. However, once we knew he was responsible for killing Rowan, we had the truck entered as stolen. There are many other investigative steps still underway, and some of those, particularly the forensic and laboratory work, will continue for many months. Although we will not have the opportunity to hold the suspect accountable through the criminal justice process, we remain committed to providing Mary, Rowan, Stella, Lindsay, and Alvin's families with a thorough investigation to provide them with any answers we can possibly learn. the Kimsey family asks that I provide the following statement on their behalf. Mary was the matriarch of our wide and close-knit family. She was a caring person to her family and her community. She was also a spiritual person who was an activist for people, nature, and the earth. Stella was incredibly passionate and fiercely loving. When she believed in something, she never gave up or backed down. Farm life was what she was born to do, and she was never happier than when she was living out on the land. Rowan was an incredibly talented and dedicated artist, traditional and tattoo, and trained many artists in the Pacific Northwest who carry her teaching and mentorship on in their work. She had a delightfully sharp wit and loved every new adventure. They all adored animals, being out in nature, and above all, each other and their family. It would make them very happy to know that the farm animals have found a good life where they will be well cared for, and we thank the Sheriff's Office and anyone else involved for ensuring they found the right home. Lindsay Haroldson was a beloved part of our family too. She was as much a sister to Stella's sister Alexis as Stella was, and they were inseparable for many years. She was sweet and funny, and she was the kind of friend to Stella and others that everyone deserved to have. We sadly did not know Alvin, but he must have been a very special person for Lindsay to have loved him, and for Mary, Rowan, and Stella to have liked him as much and as sincerely as we know they did. Additionally, Stella's sister Alexis has asked me to share that as the sister, daughter, and granddaughter of the three of the victims, she has nothing but love and compassion for Ben Parker's family, and she would like to ask the public to treat them with the same respect and care that they are giving to the Kimsey family. They, too, are facing an unimaginable loss and immense grief of their own. I'll turn it over to District Attorney Kevin Barton.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Washington County DA's office, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of these horrible crimes, their families, and their loved ones. This has left an indelible mark, not just on the families involved, but on the first responders and the entire Washington County community. My comments today will focus on two important topics. The first is speaking about our Washington County Major Crimes Team, and the second is touching on the troubling issue of domestic violence. I'd like to thank and acknowledge the tremendous response from not just the Washington County Sheriff's Office, who led this investigation, but our Washington County Major Crimes Team and other partner agencies. Our Major Crimes Team, led by the District Attorney, is comprised of the most experienced and talented investigators from throughout Washington County and all of our police agencies, including our prosecutors in the DA's office. The purpose of the Major Crimes Team is to seek justice and to promote public safety. And having a Major Crimes Team comprised of all of the different, frankly, the best investigators from the different agencies in the county, it allows for the deployment of investigative resources and expertise throughout the county to investigate complex crimes, including homicides. In this investigation, our Major Crimes Team, including 3 prosecutors, deployed on Saturday morning in coordination with the Sheriff's Office investigators. And I want to say that we're fortunate in Washington County to have such a talented and experienced group of investigators and agencies that make our county stronger and safer together. And while we can never stop crime from occurring, all of it, we can certainly ensure a speedy and robust response to solve the crime that does occur, and that is, in fact, what happened here. The second issue I'd like to touch on has to do with domestic violence. This tragedy really highlights the far too common concern present throughout our nation, including here in Washington County, and that's the issue of violence in the home, violence between intimate partners and violence between people who cohabitate together. We know that domestic violence is dramatically underreported, often occurring behind closed doors and outside of public view. We also know it can have tremendously lethal results, and the numbers are staggering. It's estimated that 42% of women have experienced domestic violence at some point in their lives. In Washington County, we know, I've seen personally, that domestic violence is a major contributing cause of the homicides that we deal with in our community. Over the last 3 years, about 2/3 of the homicides in Washington County were domestic violence-related homicides. In 2026, to date, including the most recent 5 homicides that we've had a total of 8 homicides for the year, 5 of which were domestic violence. In 2025, we had a total of 7 homicides in Washington County, 5 of which were domestic violence. And in 2024, we had 6 homicides in Washington County, 4 of which were domestic violence. In recognition of this issue, we've made tremendous efforts in our community to raise awareness and to increase safety for anyone living with or struggling with domestic violence. And that includes things like a dedicated domestic violence unit in the DA's office and dedicated domestic violence investigators at many of our partner police agencies throughout the county. Our brand new Family Peace Center, a 65,000 square foot resource here in Washington County that houses agencies that focus on domestic violence and child abuse and sex trafficking, including the Domestic Violence Resource Center, and partnerships with key organizations like the Domestic Violence Resource Center. Our goal is to increase the awareness for anyone experiencing challenges with domestic violence so that they understand that there are resources and there's help available. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Amy Babcock, the Executive Director of the Domestic Violence Resource Center. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Our community is grieving following the devastating loss of 5 lives in Forest Grove as a result of domestic violence. There are many unanswered questions surrounding this tragedy, and we may never have all the answers. What we do know is 5 people lost their lives. Families, loved ones are grieving, and the entire community has been impacted. I want to say something that is incredibly important. Domestic violence is not a private issue, it's a community issue. And domestic violence is not just physical abuse. It can be intimidation, threats, isolation, stalking, financial control, coercion, emotional abuse, or someone controlling where you go, who you see, or the choices you're allowed to make. Sometimes there's no bruises for anyone else to see, but that does not mean that that person is safe. We also know that one of the most dangerous times for a survivor can be when they are preparing to leave or attempt to leave an abusive relationship. That is why simply saying to someone, just leave, isn't enough. And sometimes leaving without a safety plan can have increased danger. If you are experiencing domestic violence, you do not have to be ready to leave to reach out to us. DVRC is available 24 hours a day. You can call us when you're scared, when something doesn't feel right, when you need someone to validate what you're experiencing, or when you want to simply understand what your options are. DVRC is available 24 hours a day to family members, coworkers, neighbors, teachers who also see something that is concerning to them. We will safety plan with you. We will listen without judgment. We will help you think through what safety can look like for you and your family. And when you are ready to take the next step, whatever that looks like, we will be there. For everyone in our community, please learn the warning signs. Check on the people you care about. Believe someone when they tell you they are afraid. Listen without judgment and help them connect with support rather than telling them what they should do. Today, our hearts are with the victims, their loved ones, the Forest Grove community, and the first responders who carried out an unimaginable responsibility through this tragedy. And tomorrow, we will continue to work together to build a community where everybody has the opportunity for safety. Thank you.
We will now take questions. Please, if you're able to, direct your question to one of our speakers. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure who would answer this question, but you mentioned that the shots were heard prior to, including on Friday. Was this the When did you get the first phone calls about this? Was the car fire the first 911 call?
So the question was whether shots were heard throughout Friday and when we first received the phone call. The first call related to anything for this event was at 5:07 a.m. on Saturday morning, and that was the neighbor who called 911 to report the fire. So that was sent to fire dispatch, and they sent the Forest Grove Fire Department. And then when they arrived and observed what I described, they relayed to dispatch that law enforcement would be needed. Recognizing the concern for their own safety, they absolutely did the right thing. They put the fire out so that no other risk existed to the public from a fire, and then removed themselves. We're incredibly thankful that none of the firefighters were injured or faced a direct threat. That's how the initial call came in.
The neighbors did say that they had heard shots prior to that.
The follow-up was if neighbors heard shots prior to that. Yes, as detectives then interviewed the neighbors on Saturday, we learned that they had heard some shots on Friday night. That was not reported at the time, but remembering that this is a rural part of Washington County, just hearing shots in and of itself isn't always suspicious. So that wasn't called in.
Was the weapon legally owned?
The question is if the weapon was legally owned. We are still working on getting the background information on that weapon.
How were you alerted to the Tacoma, the gray Tacoma that Parker was in, and then keyed onto that?
The question is how we knew about the gray Tacoma that he was in and keyed on to that. Part of our response always in the initial investigation is to learn as much as we can about where we are, who lives there, who's connected, what vehicles are connected to them, and then looking to see which vehicles might not be there anymore. So that included the registered vehicles to the people who lived at the property. That Tacoma was on a list of vehicles registered to Rowan, and the vehicle wasn't there. Detectives also talked to some neighbors who described that the suspect regularly drove that truck. So as we figured that he had potentially left the property, we believed it was likely he was in that vehicle, and that's how we were able to share that information.
Have there ever been 911 calls to that location prior to this?
The questions about prior 911 calls, we do not have prior 911 calls to this property. There was a call in January of this year from one of the suspect's family members. It was what I would describe as a routine welfare check where they had not been able to get a hold of him by phone and just wanted to make sure that he was okay. They live out of the area. Deputies were able to help him make a phone call to his family to let him know everything was fine. That's the only premise history for the property.
Him was Parker in that?
The question is who that was. Yes, that call was about Mr. Parker.
I'd like to say what the first one is regarding the press release that we just received. There's photos of all of the victims except for Alvin. I'm wondering if it'd be possible for us to get a photo of Alvin as well.
The question is about the photos that we're sharing with the public. The Chu family has requested that no photo of Alvin be shared. So we're respecting that request. And you have another question?
Yeah, and thank you for explaining that. I'm wondering if you could speak to, to us who don't understand what processing a scene is like. I mean, this sounds like an incredibly difficult scene with all of the environmental factors going on as well. And it seems like you were able to kind of piece things together despite all of that. So I'm wondering if you could talk about that.
Your question was about how we process a scene. Is your question the investigative side or the forensic processing?
Both, I suppose.
Sure. I think I've explained in pretty good detail the investigative steps that we took. What that looks like from our organization standpoint is we start to bring in all of these resources. I haven't counted up the numbers. I'm sure there were well over 100 people working on this simultaneously, so that's a huge effort, and we have quite a bit of experience in how to structure that and assign those different tasks so that no one group is overwhelmed. Then the forensic processing is handled by that group of people that I explained in my earlier statement, and they have lots of experience and training in how to work through all the evidence. They are extremely methodical. All of that is done with an eye of preserving every possible piece of evidence, often recognizing we may not know in front of us what is going to become critical later on. So that's a really slow process done with a lot of intentionality.
Are you able to tell us the names of the medication that were found prescribed to Parker?
The questions about the name of the medication prescribed to him, I don't recall the exact name of it, but I know it is directly related to treatment for bipolar.
Did you have prior contact with the suspect, Parker, other than the wellness check?
The question is if we had prior contact with the suspect other than the wellness check in January, and no, I'm not aware of. We locally have not had any prior contact with him. I can't speak to anywhere else he might have been before he lived in this area.
Do you have any information about the length of their relationship? Because I think you mentioned that Mary had known them to fight.
The question is about the length of the relationship between Stella and the suspect. That dated back to sometime in 2025. I don't know exactly when that began.
You mentioned that 3 of the 5 murders were premeditated. Do you know which ones were premeditated and what happened when they arrived on scene?
The question is, the information came in that he planned 3 of the murders and 2 more people were killed. He did not specify which of the 3 were planned.
How much time elapsed between when the phone call was made to his mother and when she reported it to you guys?
The question there was how much time passed between the phone call he made to his mother and when she called our detective as her point of contact. That phone call ended at 9:11 p.m. on Saturday night. She did not call her detective until midday on Sunday, well over 12 hours later.
Do you know how long Stella had been living at the property and how long it had been since Mary had lived there?
The question is how long Stella was on the property and how long Mary lived there. That's some information we can try to provide later. I don't have the exact breakdown for it, but the family's been connected to the property for many years.
Do you have any idea the time that Parker killed himself or around that time?
The question is if we know when Parker killed himself or what the time would be. I don't have any more information other than his phone call ended at 9:11 p.m. and he was discovered around 3 p.m. on Saturday. On Sunday.
Are the names of the pets going to be released?
I don't have all the names of the pets right now. If that's something we can learn from the family members, that's something we can look into getting to you.
So just relationship-wise, Mary was the grandmother, Rowan was her daughter, Stella was Rowan's daughter. It was a little unclear in the release yesterday.
The question is just to clarify the relationship between the 3 women there. So Mary is the grandmother, Rowan is her daughter, and Stella is Rowan's daughter.
Okay. And then we had a friend of the family email us as well and says, ask about pronouns. Do you know Stella's, what Stella went by?
The question is which pronouns some of the people who were killed used. We have some information about pronouns that some of the people may have used, but because we're not able to confirm that with them directly, we are not going to try to speculate on what they might have preferred.
I got 2 questions. On the handgun, is there any indication of whether or not he had already gone through the process of getting a background check or anything like that?
The question is about the handgun, what background information we may have on his acquiring that handgun. Similar to the prior question, that's going to be part of the firearms trace that we run on every case like that. That goes through the ATF, and it takes some time. So we will have those results. I don't have them right now.
And was there any indication that anybody tried to ever get a restraining order or anything like that?
The question is if there was ever any application for a restraining order. From the records we've checked for everybody, we don't see any indication of a request for a restraining order.
Or red flag laws, anything like that?
Similar question about red flag laws. Other than the call I described from January, we don't have any record of official contact, request for restraining orders, any other legal paperwork, any other police contact for any of the involved people directly related in any recent time.
It was mentioned that Stella had informed her friend or her grandmother that, of the fight that she had? Had she mentioned any concerns of safety?
The question about Stella's comments about the fight that happened or concerns of safety, I've shared with you all the information that I have that was relayed to anyone else.
Was there anyone else with prior knowledge to Parker's plans, or was it entirely planned by himself?
The question is if anyone else had knowledge of the suspect's prior plans. At this point, we're not aware that he might have shared information with anybody else ahead of time. And if we learn about that, of course, we'll follow up on that.
Had Parker's parents retained an attorney by the time they contacted you guys?
The question is if Parker's parents had retained an attorney by the time they contacted us. I'm not aware of them doing that.
Thanks.
Sure.
I know the details that we shared today are difficult to hear. At the center of this investigation are 5 people whose lives were taken: Mary, Rowan, Stella, Lindsay, and Alvin. As we discuss evidence, timelines, and investigative findings, we cannot lose sight of the profound loss experienced by the people who knew and loved them. I want to recognize the tremendous care and professionalism our detectives and investigative partners have brought to this case. They've worked through extraordinarily challenging circumstances with a shared commitment to finding the truth. We shared this information today in the interest of transparency and to help our community understand what occurred, while remaining mindful of the families living with this tremendous loss. Thank you all for being here and for helping us communicate with our community.